Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 40, The Nanny Behind the Man. As per usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell is competing with Andrew Lloyd Webber for the rights to Dakota Williams' next play, so he plans to wine and dine the famous Southern playwright. Knowing that Dak fancies himself as something of a ladies' man, Maxwell intends to set him up with Cindy Crawford, but Fran has a better idea: Grandma Yetta. Immediately following Yetta's surprise arrival, Cece proposes executing Fran, but to everyone else's surprise, Fran's instincts were right, as Yetta and Dak have totally hit it off. Dak signs the proposed contract and everyone is happy until the next morning at breakfast, when Yetta mentions that Dak is retired. He hasn't written a word in years because he has writer's blockage. Fran resolves this problem too, suggesting that Dak would break the contract if Yetta dumped him. After learning she was merely a cheap, tawdry sex toy in Maxwell's business dealings, Yetta agrees to dump Dak if Maxwell stops cheating on Fran with that blonde. The plan works a little too well, as Cece reports that Andrew Lloyd Webber purchased Dakota Williams' next play about an earthy, elderly Hebraic woman named Zetta, which he wrote in one night following a bout of unrequited love. Maxwell is less than pleased, but his displeasure is sidetracked by the impromptu visit of Roger Clinton, who was sent to the house after his brother, then President Bill Clinton, received a touching letter from Gracie. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, that was a good summary.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun writing it. I'm not going to lie. Would you like to take us to scene one in the living room?
Yes. Yeah, so we open in the living room. Fran's there along with Niles, Brighton, and Gracie. And Gracie is in the process of writing a letter to President Clinton. And, you know, in the, I can't recall who says it, but he must be sad that he lost the House and the Senate. Was that Niles?
No, it was Fran. So,
yeah, because Fran mentions because Gracie's having a bit of problems writing the letter, right?
Right.
And and he must be sad for losing the House and Senate. And then Niles chimes in where he's like, oh, and then he also found out that at McDonald's.
Fran still says that.
Okay. Did you catch what it was at McDonald's?
I thought she said a McLean has 10 grams of fat. I don't know what a McLean is.
That's why I couldn't quite get that. So So Fran says he must be so upset that he lost the House and Senate and then found out at McDonald's the McLean's 10 grams of fat. And Niles seems a bit surprised by this and asks about, well, what about the chicken McNuggets?
Right.
Fran says, oh, so is that where you got the McLove handles? And kind of like teasing to him. And Gracie's wondering how she should start the letter. And I think it's Brighton who says, Dear Newt. Is that what he said?
Yes. So what Gracie said is, what's the right way to address the man who runs our entire country? And Brighton says, Dear Newt, because this is after the Republicans took over.
Yeah. But Fran's like kind of chiding Brighton and says, oh, help her, write a letter you're good at writing. And he's like, well, it depends. Is it a nice letter? And Fran's like, what? Are you a Republican? He's like, I have a trust fund.
I'm no boob is his next sentence. Yeah.
So in the meantime, they go off, but Maxwell and Cece come into the room and they're talking about how Maxwell is in the process of trying to buy a screenplay that Andrew Lloyd Webber is also interested in. And of course, there's how they're talking, there's a bit of innuendo because Cece says, she likes to be on top. And
Maxwell says that just once I want to be on top. And Cece says, exactly.
I'd like that too. And then before though Niles could say anything, because of course this is the type of situation where Niles would say something.
Of course.
Cece puts an orange in Niles's mouth because Niles this entire time has been putting fruit in in a bowl. Uh,
Right.
which is funny because we've seen before in other episodes that usually there's like fake fruit in the
Mm-hmm.
bowl, but this is a time where apparently it's not.
Right. I actually maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, but I kind of thought Cece had walked in with the orange. Like maybe
Yeah,
she's
it's
like
just
picked it
funny
up.
because I mean, he was also though putting fruit in the bowl at the
He
same time.
was. Yeah.
So it works out. But again, we've seen in previous episodes that's typically it's fake.
Yes. Grandma Yetta, even the grapes.
Yep.
Poor Yetta.
So they're trying to, well, Fran's trying to kind of encourage Maxwell because he hasn't even started, and his shows are just as great as Andrew Lloyd Webber's. And Maxwell's like, oh, even Phantom of the Opera. And Fran has that kind of look on her face like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Not too convincing. But it's a futile fight, and of course Cece has to say, it I know when I've been licked, as she leaves uh the house. And of course Fran and Niles have those looks on their faces, and Fran says, give me a minute, before Niles could say anything. She's like, trying to get that image out of my head. I gotta live with it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, they are talking about um, Maxwell and Andrew Lloyd Webber. Maxwell's kind of down on himself, and Fran's like, well, he only has, the only thing he has that you don't is the middle name. And Maxwell's like, I have a middle name. And she's like, well, what is it? Now, was it Evelyn or Everly?
I think Evelyn.
Okay. Because she immediately is like, oh, never mind. And then she tries again. Something that Maxwell has that Andrew Lloyd Webber does not have. Fran.
Oh, Beverly. It's Beverly.
Everly. Okay. Because it sounded like Evelyn for some reason. Okay. Beverly. Uh, but yeah. So Andrew Lloyd Webber does not have Fran. And
That is true.
she's trying to look at Niles like to back her up, but Niles is still kind of like preoccupied by the earlier conversation about McDonald's and like fast food fat content, I guess, because he just says, what about a Whopper? Which is from Burger King, not McDonald's, but he that's his response. So basically, in this opening scene, Fran is trying to encourage Maxwell to go for it, to try to get this screenplay. Um, and is there anything you have to add to it?
I just want to mention that one thing we know that Andrew Lloyd Webber has that Maxwell Sheffield does not is Andrew Lloyd Webber has been knighted and Maxwell has not,
Ah,
which we learned in, was that only last week?
yeah,
In the
Maggie's
will.
genealogy.
Exactly. So there's that's the only thing I wanted to add.
But he also doesn't have Fran.
That is true. Fran is at Maxwell's side and his constant, cheerleader. And we will see how that plays out through the rest of the series. That's all I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
Shall I take us to scene 2?
Yes.
So I believe we're in the kitchen and Maggie is complaining to Fran that, she's kind of upset that this computer geek has offered to help her study for her PSATs, and that she can't be seen with this guy because he's basically such a dork. And she complains that not, I think Fran points out that he's not such a geek, because not everyone can pull off mittens clipped to their sleeves. And so Fran explains to her that, this is the 90s. Le geek c'est chic. Let me give you the progression. Pocket protector, software genius, compound in Malibu. And Gracie and not Gracie. Maggie's like, like a light bulb has gone off. Like, okay, he's a little dorky, but he'd probably be a good match. And Fran advises her, listen to me and be smart. And Maggie walks away, and Fran says to herself, meanwhile, I'm a maid. So then Maxwell comes in. He's talking about all of the preparations for the dinner he's hosting to wine and dine Dakota Williams, that he's taking the playwright to dinner. He thinks of himself as somewhat of a ladies' man. So I thought I'd set him up with Cindy. And, Fran kind of asked, like, what's this guy like? Oh, Dakota Williams, he's an elderly Southern gentleman, hard drinking, chain smoking, plain talking. And Fran's like, you want to set him up with Cindy Crawford? Like, going from Richard Gere to Yosemite Sam, not the great an idea. And Fran's like, leave it to me. I have the perfect person, cheap, foul mouths, find secondhand smoke, a real turn on. And he's like, you wouldn't want to go out with him. And she's like, not me. And Maxwell's like, oh, well, do you think you could convince this friend to, do this? And Fran's like, well, she's got to be willing to have cocktails in a mansion, dinner at a 5-star restaurant, ride around all night in a limo with some famous guy who's too old to jump her. It's going to be real tough. Like, clearly not a hardship here to ask this friend to be this guy's date for the night. Those are actually all of my notes on the scene. Do you want to add anything?
I would just add that whenever she replies, not me, I hate smoke. As if that's the only thing in the list for Maxwell that she does not identify with. Is
fair.
The love song. Yes.
If you were Fran's friend, would you go on this date? An elderly Southern gentleman, hard drinking, chain smoking, plain talking.
No.
Yeah, I know, me neither. I mean, yeah, it would be, I guess, cool to have. I don't drink, so having cocktails in a mansion doesn't help me. Dinner at a 5-star restaurant, also probably not so great for me because I'm a vegetarian and it's hard to find food. Riding around all night in a limo with a famous guy, meh. The fact that he's too old to jump me, that part's good. But the rest of it, anyway.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
I do not fit the requirements for this particular endeavor.
Such a shame. I guess we couldn't be Fran's friends in this regard.
Nope.
Oh well. Would you like to take us to scene 3 in the living room?
Yes. So we're in the living room, and everybody's preparing for Dakota Williams to come. So, Maxwell wants Niles to pay particular attention. Maxwell's gone ahead and has ordered, I've had boat Cajun blues land.
Yeah, so a Cajun blues band he had flown in from New Orleans.
Yes. And Cece replies, or is that, okay. Fran replies, oh, look, you have some gumbos.
Something like that about gumbos, yeah.
Yes. But they're eagerly awaiting him to come because apparently he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. And Fran, of course, is like, oh, the Pulitzer clearinghouse?
Right.
And before she said that, Cece had told her to take a powder when she came in, and Maxwell kind of chided her. But after Fran makes the clearinghouse comment, Maxwell also says to her to take a powder.
Right.
Which, I mean, I take to mean that she should leave.
Yeah, that's what I took it too. Like, go to the powder room.
Powder your nose kind of thing.
Right.
It's not a phrase that I'm particularly
fond of.
Well, that too, but I hadn't really heard of it. Have you? Like, aside from watching The Nanny?
I honestly couldn't tell you. I mean, I understood that they were trying to get rid of her at that point.
Yes, exactly.
Before you get to Dakota Williams' arrival, I just want to circle back. You said that Maxwell told Niles to be particularly attentive to Mr. Williams, and Cece says to Niles especially on your toes.
Stay on his toes, yeah.
And so he immediately goes and steps on her toes. Oh, you meant my toes.
Yes.
So, yes. Okay, continue.
So, Dakota Williams, again, he's considered to be a Southern gentleman who likes whiskey, and he when he comes in, they offer him a drink, and I couldn't catch the name of the drink. It was some type of whiskey.
I thought he said salt marsh whiskey, but I
Okay.
don't know types of whiskey, so
I don't know, but basically Maxwell turns to Niles and is like, "We have that, right?" And he's like, "What are you nuts, sir?"
yeah, but
So it
just
was obviously a drink that would not have been in the Sheffield household.
correct. And like it's funny because Maxwell is so certain, like, we've got that, don't we, Niles? Like, absolutely we'd have it. And Niles, as you put it, was just like, "What are you nuts?" Like, absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah, we do not have that. But anyway, they're asking where he gets his inspiration. And he says, an alcoholic, just give me an alcoholic spinster. And of course, Niles then kind of does a flourish to Cece and says, ta-da.
Uh-huh.
So then we actually get an interaction between Fran and Dakota Williams, who, as you noted in your summary, they call Dak like throughout, like
Mm-hmm.
after this scene. And, he's like, oh, sugar, sugar.
He
Who are
says
you?
sugar 3 times.
Yeah, sugar,
Oh,
sugar, sugar.
little darling, who are you? Ugh.
And Fran, we learn, has actually played a character in high school from one of his plays. And she contends that because of her accent, everybody thought she was from the South, which is
Correct.
laughable.
Exactly.
And she recalls a particular death scene as well. Um, and she notes, she makes the comment that this was in Flushing, and he, of course, says like a toilet, and Fran says, yeah, on a good day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Dakota Dak thinks that Fran's his date, and he's excited. He mentions 2 June bugs, and I don't know, like
At
all
a
these.
summer picnic.
Yes, but it turns out no, uh, not she is not his date. Um, and who should arrive?
Well, before she arrives, did you catch
Yeah.
the exchange between Dak, Maxwell, and Cece?
Well, my notes are a little indecipherable,
Okay,
so if you'd
so
like to fill us in.
yeah, so when Dak is told that Fran's not his date, he's like, "What?" And Cece jumps in, "Your date's even cruder." And Maxwell's like,
Oh yes,
"Yes, much."
yes.
Um,
And
yeah.
and again, we open the door, and in walks Grandma Yetta.
Uh-huh.
And she's late. She's apologizing, but she had to dig out her brassiere that hooks in the front.
Exactly. And everyone's like jaws are on the ground, like Cece and Maxwell's jaws are on the ground, and Fran's like still so happy with herself. She's like, "What? No good?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Will you want to take us to the kitchen?
I would love to. So we started the scene, and it's before anyone comes in except for Niles, who's sitting at the table eating clearly a fast food burger, and he's clearly enjoying himself. And then we hear Maxwell yelling at Fran, and they come in from the dining room, and Maxwell is basically besides himself. "Miss Fine, you fixed up America's foremost playwright with a woman whose greatest attribute is rice that doesn't stick together." And she's like, "But he seemed happy when he met her." "Well, he's drunk out of his mind." "Well, she's on painkillers. Maybe neither of them will realize they're together." And you know, um, Maxwell starts asking her things like, "What? Like, haven't I always been good to you? Didn't I give you a job when you needed one? Didn't I all the slim fast bars you can eat?" And she's like agreeing every time. He's like, "And how do you repay me?" Like total, like perfect example of guilt right there. Um, and her response is, "I was just trying to be the woman behind the man." And he's like, "Well, how would you like to be the woman behind a Burger King counter?" And Niles chimes in that one of the local Burger Kings is hiring. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so then Cece comes in. She's like, "Well, basically, like, at first I thought when Yetta got here that she was his date, but like she doesn't, she's like laughing, thinking it's funny." And Niles is just like, oh, let me tell her in lieu of a Christmas bonus. And Cece has one of the over the top reactions. No! She like throws herself on the ground. And then she like, you know, says to Fran, it's your fault. And she turns to Maxwell. Maxwell, let's kill her. And he's like, Cece, this is something I'd rather do in private. Thank you. And so he sends Niles and Cece off, and Niles cleans up his little burger mess. And Fran tries to defend herself. Let me just tell you my thinking. Angela Lloyd Webber would have never thought to fix him up with someone like Grandma Yetta. There's a beat, and then he like chases her.
I would just add that he actually says he prefers to do that without witnesses.
Thank you. Yes, without witnesses, as if he's going to do something bad.
Mhm.
Would you like to take us to scene 5, back
Yeah.
towards the
So
living room?
yeah, so we have Cece and Niles in the hallway walking back towards the living room, and Cece's very pleased because now Nanny Fine has dug a hole deep enough to cover her and her hair.
Yep.
So they so um as they're going to the living room, we're kind of transitioning into the living room. There's some new angles here, but you know, I think Niall says there's something on her face,
Right.
and he takes the napkin, which earlier he had kind of, whenever Fran and Maxwell had like stormed into the kitchen, he tried to cover up his burger with it. But she takes that napkin and she wipes her face. And of course, she puts sauce all over her face.
Correct.
She asks Niles, how do I look? And he just replies, yummy.
Exactly.
So first of all, I'm like, how can she not feel it? But anyway,
Right. That was my thought too.
yeah. And so Maxwell and Fran come in as well, and Maxwell's face when he looks at Cece is like, what? Even more, like, what happened to your face? And um then Cece realizes she has the sauce on her face, and then she takes Niles's necktie while he's wearing it and uses it to try to clean up her face.
Did you catch what Niall said when Maxwell asked Cece what happened to your face?
She cut herself shaving.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, we kind of pan further up in the living room where apparently Dak and Grandma Yetta have been in conversation, but they're talking about like different growths on their bodies.
Right.
Apparently, Grandma Yetta's like for 30 years, it looked like Danny DeVito. And he's like, oh, that's nothing. Here, let me show you. I've got one uh, the size of a gas cap growing on my butt. And he like moves to like undo his buckle. And Fran's like, we believe you. Like, stop. Um, but
And then Yetta says, oh, I've got something for you, but first I've got to take off my girdle.
yes, and this Dak is like, oh, you little tease. Um, it's such a turn on. And Cece says, oh yes, hell, she turns me on, which was weird. But then
Yep.
Cece tries to like take advantage of this moment because obviously Dak likes Yetta. And she's like, oh, let's go look over the deal before you sober. I mean, supper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then so Dak leaves first, and Grandma Yetta turns to Cece, and she's like, it's all about the body language, you know,
Correct.
watch the walk. And I don't even know how to describe this, Debbie, but Grandma Yetta starts leaving, and both of her hands are kind of up but down, kind of like a T-Rex, kind of. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then like she kind of just moves like very, and then Cece actually, like for a split second, you see Cece actually following her, doing the exact same kind of walk.
Right.
Yeah. And so once they've left the room, Maxwell turns to Fran and like he, he's amazed that, I don't know why. Don't know
So
why you're. That
Fran
doesn't make.
says that.
Okay. I don't know why, you're making such a show. Is that what
No,
she said?
I don't know why you're so shocked. I mean, you
Oh,
asked
shocked.
me to fix the man up with someone. I followed my instincts. Simple, but bonus worthy.
Uh-huh. And then, of course, Maxwell's like, I could just kiss you. But this time he does not. He turns away and Fran just kind of left, huh? Like she was kind of expecting an actual kiss. That was the impression I got.
Right, because she says coulda, shoulda, woulda, but didn't. Like she's disappointed.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So we were not able to add to the kiss count at this
No,
time.
no, unfortunately, no.
Anything else you want to add to this scene?
No, I think
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, can you take us to the kitchen?
Sure. I don't know how you cut the scene, so I'll stop where I think the scene ends and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so, Niles is in the kitchen. Fran walks in from the dining room, and we see that the kitchen and the dining room are next to each other when she opens the door. And so she's telling Niles that, he keeps calling me his right arm and, you know, um, like clearly the night had gone. This is the next morning. She's in her traditional bathrobe for breakfast. And,
Mhm.
you know, Niles comments, Miss Fine, you have more lives than Garfield. And she notices what he's cooking with eggs and onions and lox. And apparently Grandma Yetta left her order on the door before she went to bed because she thinks she's staying at the Fountain Blue. And so Fran advises Niles, if you want to make a buck, tie your shirt into a calypso knot and serve her a margarita. Um, and she like tastes what Niles is cooking, but then she's like heading back into the dining room. She's saying, I'm feeling a little short. It's time to get back on my pedestal.
Mhm.
So that's basically where I thought that's where I marked the end of the scene. I don't know if you want me to continue
Yeah.
with. Okay.
That's where I did as well, but if you want to, you could go on into the next scene if you want.
I'm always happy to keep talking.
Okay. It kind of flows, so
Right. Yeah, because it,
it's
it, it
fine.
ties together.
Yeah.
Um, so, we're now in the dining room and Maxwell is having his eggs for breakfast and he's thrilled because he owns Dakota Williams' next play. He finally beat Angela Weber. And as he says to Fran, it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for you. And she's like, oh, you did it all yourself. I was merely your and Niles is like right arm, like totally deadpan, like not feeding into it at all. And Fran's like, oh, stop it. Oh, it's you. And so then Yetta comes in and she says to Niles, I'll have a little of everything. I'm on the American plan. Because again, she doesn't know where she is. Um, and so they're talking about the night before, and Fran's like, Yetta, you didn't drop anything under the table and go look for it, did you? And Yetta's like, one time, just to see if I still had it. And the like color drains from Maxwell's face, and he's like shocked that was you. And Yetta looks at him, that was you? They just look at each other. It's super awkward. And Fran's like, do you two want to be
She was
alone?
she was kind
Um,
of delighted though. Like Grandma Yetta, I got the impression that she was more delighted than awkward.
I mean, she was thrilled, but I felt very awkward. And I'm pretty
Oh
sure
yeah.
Fran felt very awkward.
Yeah, that is true.
Um, our listeners can use their imagination as to what happened under the table. I'm not getting into it. Um,
Mhm.
so Yetta sits down and she basically changes the subject. Meanwhile, Dak and I are a match made in heaven. I like dark meat, he likes light. I can hear the movie, he can see it. I got a right lung, he's got a left. But the best part is he's retired. And Fran's like, no, Fran and Maxwell are trying to convince her, like, no, he's not retired. He still has a play to finish. And Yetta's like, good luck. The man hasn't written a word in 20 years. What is she saying? And you know, Fran's like, you're confused. Mr. Sheffield just bought his play. And he's like, I have the first act on my desk. And she's like, Yetta's like, did you happen to notice it was written with a quill pen? I'm saying is don't hold your breath for the second act. The man's got writer's blockage. And like Maxwell's clearly upset. And Yetta's like, thank you for introducing us. Most guys my age are senile. I'll be in the gift shop. And she like walks out. And poor Maxwell's like about to have a conniption. He's like, so I now own a play that is entirely worthless, and Angel Lloyd Webber does not. My right arm is strangely silent. Did it have a stroke? And Fran's like, it's thinking, it's thinking. And then she comes up with this brilliant plan. Well, why did Dakota Williams sign with you? Well, because my plays are just as good as Andrew Lloyd Webber's. No, really. He signed because of Yetta. He might back out of the deal if she dumps him. And like Maxwell initially is like, yeah, that makes sense. And then he's like, wait a minute, but Dak is the most exciting man she's ever met. I mean, what would make her leave him? And Fran's like, well, she did have her eye on the couch in the lobby. And so the two of them go to talk to Yetta.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add, or do you want to pick up with their conversation with Yetta?
I'll just pick up in the living room. We see Yetta, and she's picking up like a little like crystal cup or glass or something, and she's looking at the bottom and she's saying, I hate it when they don't put the prices on things.
Yeah.
Again, still in this concept that it's a gift shop. Um,
Poor
and so
Yetta.
Maxwell tries to broach the topic of breaking up with Dak by saying, he drinks and he swears like a sailor and he's a scoundrel to women or with women. And Fran looks at him like, are you trying to get her to break up with him? Or like, because she makes it seem like that's all desirable, right? Like that's not going to change Yetta's mind.
Right. Are you trying to talk her out of it or into it?
Exactly. And Fran then just turns to Yetta and says, Yetta, you got to break up with him. Why? He's cute and loaded. And then she points out that if she marries Dak, then eventually everything would be Fran's. And so Fran, of course, at that moment turns to Maxwell's like, oh, do we really need to break the
Right.
and but at the same time too, Maxwell's also feeling kind of guilty, that this could be yet his last chance at happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Does he really want to take that away from her? All over business, and this is when Yetta realizes this is all due to business,
Right.
and this is when she's like, I was treated like a cheap, tawdry sex toy. Why does this always happen to me?
Exactly.
And now, but she acknowledges though that business is important. She's an entrepreneur. I think that's it.
Yeah.
It's definitely, it does not say it as entrepreneur.
Correct. I myself am an entrepreneur. And did you catch what Fran said after she says that?
No, I did not.
Boy, my family's got to stop breeding.
Uh-huh. So then Yetta's like, I need to talk to your husband in private.
Correct.
Meaning Maxwell. So she pulls Maxwell aside, and then she's trying to make a deal with him. Like, hey, I will give up Dak if you stop fooling around with the blonde. Shame on you. Don't you see what you have in front of you? And we see Fran on the couch, like just
Eating Yetta's breakfast.
yes. So it's that continuation of Yetta, just like assuming they're married and stuff. And
Right.
again, that we saw this several episodes ago when she also has this idea that Maxwell's cheating on Fran with Cece. She's not pleased by that.
Right. Because as she says to Fran, I don't know if you've noticed, but your kids are blonde.
Yes. Anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
So in the next scene, we're back in the living room, and Maggie's sitting on the couch, and I find it very interesting that she's sitting on the couch with her shoes on and her feet up, and it's a white couch. But she's upset. She has a bowl of popcorn in her lap, I think. And Fran asks, what's wrong? And Maggie complains that the computer nerd asked me out. And Fran's like, oh, so he's getting a little interactive, huh? And Maggie's like, Fran, I don't want to go out with him. Oh, he'll wear that hat with the ear flaps. And Fran's like, let me impart some wisdom to you. My mother always dressed my father in leisure suits, and no one has ever stolen him away. And like Maggie sort of gets the point, but then she's like, Fran, you don't understand. My best friend Whitney is going out with a football player who is just so studly. And Fran explains to her, all right, honey, let me give you the progression here. Star quarterback, pulled groin, beer gut. Can I check your oil, please?
Mm-hmm.
Again, trying to like show Maggie that like high school appearances are not everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
She's looking long term.
Exactly, which is a better way to think about it. But of course, as a teenager, it's sort of hard to do that.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think Maggie leaves, and that's all I had for this scene.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Because then we go to the office, and Maxwell and Niles are in there, and they're they're happy because obviously now Dak has pulled out, but we hear Cece calling that she's coming in. She's coming in, and she has bad, terrible news. And Niles kind of makes a look, like, well, duh, it's Cece coming in.
and he says, "Isn't that redundant?"
Yes, yeah. And in comes Cece, and she has a newspaper article, and it turns out that Andrew Lloyd Webber has entered into a contract with Dak. And at first, Maxwell's like, oh, yeah, so now he has a worthless play, But no,
Right.
no, no. You look at it, and the article says that he finished it in one night. And so he yells for Miss Vaughn, I believe.
Oh, Miss Fine.
Yes.
And
So,
she comes in.
and she's like very upbeat, thinking like he's still gonna praise her, right? And she says,
Hmm.
oh, are you playing the hokey pokey? Do you need your right arm in? As if that's why, he called for her.
Right.
And Niles is like, I would advise you to take it out before he shakes it all about.
Correct.
So again, they're looking at it, and apparently Dak was inspired to complete the play due to unrequited love. And again, this is where we get the description of the main lead, who is different from all of his other works. It's an earthy, elderly, brave woman named Zeta,
Correct.
which again, obviously is Yetta. Do you
Right.
have anything to add to that?
I just want to add that I particularly liked this scene because, like, each time, like, not Niall, sorry, Maxwell and Fran were both like really thought that this was a good thing that Andrew Lloyd Webber had stolen their playwright. Like, tell us something we don't know, and like, you know,
Mhm.
uh, he just bought Dakota Williams' long-awaited opus named "You Better Like Act One" because there ain't no Act Two. Like, they're super
Yeah.
excited, and then Cece just like crushes them. The newspaper article crushes them. I love that, the comedic timing they have on the show. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh, so Fran also, I will say that Fran had tried to leave as Maxwell was reading the newspaper article, but Maxwell did not let her go. So now she's escaped, and the scene is basically she's like starting to run down the stairs, and she's commenting, "Ever since I started working here, I don't need a treadmill." And as
Mhm.
she's going down the stairs, Niles is coming up the stairs saying that, "I'm going to get Miss Grace. Mr. Clinton is here." And Fran's excited. The president? He knows Streisand. And so she
Yeah.
like runs
That
in.
that's the exciting part.
Right. He knows Streisand. And then like she gets in there, "Who the hell are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm Roger Clinton." And she's like, "Do you know Streisand?" And he's like, "Well, I was at the inauguration, but I had terrible seats."
Hmm.
And Maxwell, shouts, "Miss Fine, you haven't been dismissed." And then he like sees they have company. "Oh, who's this?" And Fran's like, "This is Roger Clinton." And he's like, "Oh, why? Like, why are you here?"
Why?
Um, and Roger's like, "Well, your daughter wrote my brother a letter, and he was so touched that he asked me to stop by while I was in town." And like, there's something very nice about that. And then Gracie tears in, "Where's the president?" "Oh, honey, honey, he couldn't make it, so he sent his brother instead." "Oh, isn't this exciting? Honey, go get your camera." "Why would I want?" And Fran just like shuts her up. "Go get your camera."
Yes.
And
You want a picture?
right, like, why would I want a picture with the president's brother? But no, no, go get the camera. So you know, Maxwell's talking to Roger Clinton, and he says, "Miss Fine here is a great admirer and supporter of your entire family." "Yes, I am," she says. And Roger Clinton's like, "Oh, thank you. That's so nice to hear." And Maxwell's like, "In fact, you should send for her in '96. She's an inspiration to have in your corner." And Roger's like, "I'll tell Bill. He's always looking for a good right arm." And Fran and Maxwell like step back, and she's like, "Mr. Sheffield, that was so nice of you. I thought you were a Republican." And he's like, "I am."
Mhm.
Do you want to add anything?
No. So, the end credit scene is Yetta sitting on her the couch in the gift shop, which is actually just the couch in the Sheffield living room, and it's being picked up. Um, and and they're taking it out. That's, again, her gift for breaking up with Dak. And uh, does she make the comment that if it was a club chair she would have put out?
I think
Or is that
so.
Grant? Okay, I think it's her. Like if it was a club chair, she would have put out. It's a very quick scene at the end.
Right. Um, is there any larger things you want to talk about before we jump into our shticks?
Um, I don't think there was anything in particular. Did you?
No, I really like the timing on the show, which I've already commented on. So, shall we go
Okay.
to favorite fashion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you start.
Okay. Um, I like a lot of the outfits that Fran wore in this episode, starting with what she wore for the night, for the dinner with Dakota Williams. She's wearing, her typical black turtleneck shirt with black tights, black heels, and then over it is a red and black striped, diagonally striped wavy dress or wavy diagonal stripes on the dress. I really like that outfit. I also like in the first scene when she's wearing the Donna Karen suit, which is neon green with a black and white horizontal striped turtleneck. I also like that outfit. Not sure I could pull off a neon green suit, but I still like it. Yeah, and then I think this is the episode. Um, I think she also wears, maybe I might be confusing this with the next episode. So if I am, I'm sorry. She's also wearing the pastel multicolored like skirt and top suit, I guess. I also like that. I wouldn't wear it, but I like it. So I basically liked everything she wore in this episode.
Yeah. Well, again, we saw in this episode I believe we saw the return of the bathrobe.
We did.
Because I feel like we haven't really seen that recently.
Yeah. I mean, uh there haven't been as many breakfast scenes, and sometimes she's actually been dressed, which is weird.
Yeah. So that just kind of stood out to me that we're back with the robes.
What did you think of Yetta's attire for her date with Dak?
She was all decked out in gold.
Yes.
I mean, it kind of looked elderly to me.
It also seemed a little dated to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, she's older, so.
yeah, no, I mean it looked good on her for her character. I wouldn't wear it. Um,
Excuse
bless you.
me. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any other fashion you want to talk about?
Um, I don't think so.
Okay.
Now, I feel like there weren't as many notable New Yorkers in this episode. Did you have that feeling too?
I feel like there were more than I think last week.
Probably. Yeah. I just feel like there's some episodes that are so like full of them,
Hmm.
comparatively speaking.
Yeah.
Um, doesn't feel as much.
And this one
Um,
also had the repeated reference to Andrew Lloyd Webber and a repeated reference to Streisand. Both are people we've talked about previously, so we do not need to define again.
we have spoken about them very often.
At length. Yes.
Yes.
And we will continue to talk about them as the series continues. Just
um,
heads up.
yeah. But actually, so we start out a bit more politically in terms
Correct.
of, then President Clinton, um, and Newt, which again, I'm assuming
Gingrich.
Yep,
Yes.
exactly. And then we, I mean, everybody knows McDonald's, I'm sure. I'm wondering if there was a particular, I feel like there's probably a particular push in the 90s regarding fat content, which is why that may have been brought up, but that's speculation on my end.
I mean, I think that would make sense, but that's also something that comes up periodically to the present day also, like the
Mhm.
fat content. I know a while back, like, was it trans fats were banned? And
Yeah, yeah. And so, but I feel like there may have been more of a push. I don't know. Anyway, Phantom of the Opera, I feel like we've probably referenced before.
I
Like,
don't think we have. I I mean, maybe we have, but I wrote a little summary.
go
So,
for it.
okay, so it's my favorite Broadway show, hence why I wrote a summary from memory. It is currently the longest running show on Broadway, which beat out Cats a number of years ago. Music is written by Andrew Lloyd Webber. The lyrics are done by Tim Rice. It is about an opera singer who is attracted to the romantic attentions of a viscount and the opera ghost who haunts the theater where she works. It is based on a book by the same title by Gaston Leroux. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
the end.
You mentioned too that originally Maxwell was trying to get Cindy Crawford to
Yep.
be the date for Dak. Again, she's a famous supermodel.
Yep.
Did you wanted to add to that description?
I think we've talked about her previously also, but yes, she was an American supermodel, television personality, and actress. She was married to Richard Gere from 1991 to 1995 when they got divorced.
Yep, and again, that's why we get a reference then to Richard Gere as well. Gere. I can't. It's
He's an
been a week.
American actor who started his film career in Looking for Mr. Goodbar, which was referenced in a previous episode of The Nanny. He's known for roles in films including American Gigolo, Pretty Woman, and others,
Hmm.
according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yes. I feel like we've talked about the Pulitzer Prize before, or have we not?
I don't think we have.
Okay.
Um, so the Pulitzer Prize is uh, it's an award that was established to incentivize excellence. It was established through the will of Joseph Pulitzer, the Hungarian-born embodiment of American journalism, who actually reshaped journalism, and basically it provides prizes for journalism, letters, drama, education, and other scholarships. That's according to its own website.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Again, do you have like, but there's a reference to Danny DeVito
That's
whenever
one I missed.
talking. Okay. Well, Danny DeVito is also an actor, and for instance, he was in Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Um,
Hmm.
and he's known for his shorter stature, I would say, probably. I don't have a full on summary, though, for him. I'm sure our listeners are probably familiar with him.
Probably. And if not, they can also Google him.
Yeah. Um, do you have
Yeah,
some you want to mention?
sure. So back to the list of fast food restaurants that were talked about, they also reference Burger King,
Mhm.
Bob's Big Boy, which is an American restaurant chain that started actually in 1936, known for its double-decker hamburger. That's according to Wikipedia. Uh, Niles tells Fran she has more lives than Garfield. Garfield, uh, the Garfield that he is referencing is the cartoon orange cat who hates Mondays and loves lasagna. There's a reference to the Fountain Blue, which I think we've talked about previously. Um, Molly Ringwald. Um,
Mhm.
she's an American actress, dancer, singer, and author who's known for her roles in the television show Facts of Life and for playing a teen icon in the 80s, starring in films 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and Pretty in Pink, according to our friends at Wikipedia. Barbara Streisand, we've already covered. Roger Clinton. That was actually Roger Clinton, who
Mhm.
was Bill Clinton's younger half brother. He's an American musician and actor in his own right. In addition to guest starring on The Nanny, he guest starred on Sabrina the Teenage Witch and a couple other
Hmm,
shows.
hmm.
According to Wikipedia, apparently his Secret Service code name was Headache because of some of his controversial behavior.
Oh, wow.
For those who want details, please check out the website on Wikipedia, the page on him. You'll find it very informative.
Wow.
Um, yeah. I'm trying to think if there were
I
any
didn't
others.
I feel bad, but I had never heard of him. Had you prior to like this?
I read Bill Clinton's memoirs, so
Ah, okay.
but that was also after I had watched The Nanny, so I'm not really sure how to answer that question.
Gotcha. Okay.
um,
But you've heard of him independent of the nanny.
yes.
Mhm.
Um, Yosemite Sam. Uh, he's a Looney Tunes cartoon character named after Yosemite National Park. He is the adversary of Bugs Bunny. And I will now quote Wikipedia. He is commonly depicted as an extremely aggressive gunslinging outlaw, pirate, or cowboy with a hair trigger temper and an intense hatred of rabbits. End quote.
Mhm.
The last one I think I have is Donna Karen. Uh, she's an American fashion designer who created DKNY, short for Donna Karen, New York. That's according also to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think I have any more either. So,
Awesome. Um, so for Yiddishakov, I have basically one thing. Um, in the scene where the very short scene where Fran comes to talk to Maggie and she's like, basically, what's wrong? She asks her, what's with the Barbara singer? I'm totally mispronouncing this because every time I heard it, I thought she said Ungerpuss and Impunum, which is
mhm.
the way I would have, which is what I think she said. But according to my online research, I think she probably was supposed to say far, far, Barbiciner Punum. Either way, she means sourpuss, a sour face.
Mm, mhm.
Um, and then the only other thing is there's a reference to lox, which is smoked salmon, which is usually eaten on a bagel with cream cheese.
Mhm.
Bagels. Sorry. Um, 90s nostalgia.
Yes. Of course, the thing that immediately comes to my mind is that scene with Roger Clinton where Fran's like, "Go grab the camera" to Gracie
Oh, fair.
because again, someone would just like whip out their cell phone these days and ask to take a selfie.
Fair. Although Gracie's like all of 7. So would she have a phone of her own?
There are some younger kids that do have phones.
Huh.
It varies family to family.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I totally sorry. I'm gonna circle back to our notable New Yorkers. The guy who played Dakota Williams is famous. Uh,
Well, there was a, whenever he made his entrance, there was kind of a notable audience reaction.
so he was played by George Murdoch. He was an actor who, according to IMDb, was known for his roles on Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, Breaker, and Orange County. So he actually has a very, very long filmography. He was on, I think, Days of Our Lives, Judging Amy, Law and Order, The X Files, Just Shoot Me. Like I'm just basically pulling the things I've heard of. ER.
Yeah.
Um, so he's been on a ton of different things, both before and after The Nanny. Most of the ones I just shared were after The Nanny, but still,
Mhm.
um, he has quite a long filmography. So
Mhm.
sorry, I wanted to make sure we didn't
Yeah, miss
forget him.
that like we
Yeah,
have before.
exactly. Whenever there's a very famous guest star, sometimes we're just like, oh, that's the character, and we just keep going. But
Yeah.
we should mention them.
Yeah.
So back to 90s nostalgia. What about Gracie writing an actual letter to the president?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like trying to think whether like with young children whether they would still have kids write out, a letter. because I remember writing letters in elementary school. I don't know about you. But again, yeah, probably email.
Yeah, I would think so.
Dave. Or like post having like the parent post something on social media and tagging them. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe children would still write letters. I don't know.
Yeah. Any listeners who have children,
Let us
let us
know.
know. Is letter
Exactly.
writing still a thing?
I mean, my understanding is they're no longer teaching children script in schools or cursive. So
Mm-hmm.
who knows? Maybe all writing is out now also.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm snarky. Um,
Well, I do know a lot of like a lot of kids, even in kindergarten, have like, Chromebooks or tablets or something like in school. I mean, they still have to write out stuff, but it's very different from back in our day.
exactly. I mean, back in our day, there was a computer lab and
Yeah.
we had the dream writers, which is what we learned typing on. And they were like the colorful MacBook. Anyway, I'm clearly dating myself. Um, then go ahead, be Niles and say dating yourself. Even you can do better than you, which is exactly what he says to Cece when she says she's dating herself. Um, I digress. I'll throw out my usual old cars.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, there wasn't much else that really stuck out to me.
no, no, me neither.
Okay.
So I
Some future fun.
yes. So for I have a couple different things. So I'm going to start minor. One of the reasons I mentioned I asked you what you thought of Yetta's attire is because in season 5, Yetta is going to a formal affair, and Sylvia makes fun of her because she's wearing pants, and Yetta is just like basically like looks down. She's like, "Oh, and here I am thinking I'm so sexy with this high slit." It was pants. Um, that's a great episode. I look forward to us discussing it. Um, in season 5, also, Yetta and Cece are at a wedding, and they end up dancing together. And Yetta, instead of being the cheap, tawdry sex toy, she sort of treats Cece as a well, I won't say a cheap, tawdry sex toy, but she point blank says to her while they're dancing, "I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a little turned on."
Mm.
And Cece looks very uncomfortable. Um, for those who are concerned that Fran and Maxwell just ruined Yetta's last chance for love, no need to worry. Yetta finds love again with a man named Sammy, who is played by Ray Charles.
Oh wow.
So that's in season
Get it.
5. So they get engaged. It's very cute. Um, and then the final one, which is totally unrelated to my babbling about Yetta, Roger Clinton buys the townhouse next door and actually appears on 2 other episodes of The Nanny.
Huh.
Um, in the final season, a Bill Clinton, I put that in air quotes because Bill Clinton did not actually come on The Nanny, which would have been awesome, just saying, if he had. Bill Clinton tells Fran that his brother is actually selling the townhouse and moving because of Roger's neighbor's mother with the big blonde hair, who's always yelling and stealing his pizzas. I'll give you one guess as to who that blonde woman is.
Hmm.
It is not Cece. For those who are confused, it is Sylvia. So, just in case anyone was confused, it's clearly Sylvia. And Fran's reaction is, "Oh, well, we're thinking of moving too. We're thinking of moving too." So yeah, that's our future fun. It's time to rate the episode. Is it? I think it's your turn. I
It
think.
is my turn.
I love it when it's your turn. Although this one's an easy one for me. So
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna give it a 4. It was enjoyable. Yetta was funny, but it's not out of the stuff we've watched my favorite. So I'll just go with a 4. How about you?
I'm giving it a 5. I'm giving it a 5. It is not my favorite episode, but it's just so much fun to watch. And, you know, the timing is great. The jokes are funny. I love how Yetta, you know, recognizes that she was used as a cheap tawdry sex toy. And, well, why does this keep happening? Why does this always happen to me? Well,
Why
I
does
was,
this happen to me?
and then
Uh,
she's like, well, I was there. How could you not use me? Like,
yeah,
she just like switches from being totally offended to just total
resigned to her
acceptance.
fate. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny. And Fran is, of course, thinking out of the box. And, you know, at first it looks like it's going to go really badly, but then like her instincts were totally right, you know?
Mhm.
Um, so I like that. I like, um, there's just, I don't think there's anything in this episode I didn't like.
You know what though? What
What?
you just made me think of is like, why would Maxwell be upset with Fran with him getting the deal? How would she have known that he had like that Dak had not written in 20 years?
She
You
wouldn't
know?
have known.
Yeah. So like I think that's kind of unreasonable.
I mean, I suppose, like, I mean, Yetta points out, like, didn't you realize it was written with a quill pen? Like,
Yeah.
Maxwell
So like
probably
I
should
feel
have.
like that's more on Maxwell and Cece. You know what I mean?
I'd say it's entirely on Maxwell because Cece told him to like let it go,
Oh,
let
hmm.
Angela Weber take it.
Well, okay. So then to that effect, Fran did encourage him. But
Fran did
still.
encourage him, and Fran is also responsible for him making the deal that ended with him having this worthless play. You better like Act One because there ain't no Act Two.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean it is sort of unreasonable. But keep in mind, like Maxwell likes to blame Fran when she intervenes and things go poorly, and she
Yeah.
takes the blame usually. So
Hmm.
sort of on her too. Like she should maybe say, "Hey, you're the one who picked out the playwright. You're the one who came up with this moronic plan." I mean, because I like that Fran thought about it so differently than Maxwell and obviously Andrew Lloyd Webber also like set him up with a woman, you know, his own age.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I like it. It's a show. It's an episode that I will watch again and again and again, and I have.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm
Yeah.
giving it a 5. I'm also not limiting 5s to my favorite episodes because otherwise there would literally be one episode that would get a 5.
Oh, really?
Well, no,
Interesting.
I mean the way you said it, it was not your favorite episode. So like if that was the threshold for giving,
One of my,
okay,
like
that's better. Yeah,
relatively speaking. Yeah.
I really like this episode. So, which is funny because when I saw the name, The Nanny Behind the Man, I was like, what is this episode? Like, what is the what? I could like based on its title, I couldn't think of what it was, and then I watched. I'm like, oh, this is delightful. This is wonderful. Um, so yeah, that's why I'm giving it a 5.
Okay.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
I do not.
All right. That's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 41, A Fine Friendship.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.